Welcome, friends, to a gathering place for the curious and the brave. Do you ever feel a shiver run down your spine on a perfectly ordinary day? Does the rustle of leaves in the wind sometimes whisper secrets in your ear? We delve into the realm of the unexplained. These are true stories, whispered through generations, passed down from campfire to campfire, each one abrush with the unseen. So settle in, adjust the lights, and prepare to be chilled. Tonight, we share true scary stories.
I love the beach, and I wish I could go more. Last year was the first time in years that I was able to make a trip with my family to a small town on Cape Cod. This was exactly what I needed in my life at the time. I was just feeling really depressed. I don't know if it was because of the state of the world or the fact that I had been single for 5 years at that point. But whatever the reason, I just needed some freedom and peace of mind. My brother's wife's family owned a home that was right on the ocean, and this place was amazing. It was quiet and peaceful. All the houses on the street that they lived on had their own private beach areas, so you could legitimately go to the beach whenever you wanted. I would wake up at 6 a.m. and drink my coffee down on the beach. Then, after dinner, I would go down again and just stare at the moon and stars reflecting off the ocean. This was my routine just about every day on that vacation. One night, I went down to the beach a little after 11 p.m. or so. I set up my chair and just listened to the waves gently crashing. I kept turning around, though, because I thought I could hear the sound of something shuffling around behind me. My first thought was that some sort of animal must be digging around in the sand for food or something. I did remember one time at the house I'd seen a few foxes that lived somewhere near the area. Perhaps it was an animal like that. I kept squinting into the darkness, but I didn't see anything. It became apparent to me that whatever it was I was hearing, it was nothing to be concerned about. The night continued, and periodically I would hear the noise again. Every time I would turn around, but I would see nothing there at all. A little before 1 a.m., I had to head back inside for a minute to grab a drink and use the bathroom as well. I planned on staying out there for this one last beer. When I got back to my chair outside, though, I felt like it had moved position slightly. I couldn't be sure, though. I sat down and tried to focus on the beauty of nature itself. The moon and ocean were drawing my attention, but something just kept nagging at me. I'm not one to give in to emotions or anything like that, but I certainly felt off for some reason. I remained outside for another 15 minutes or so, and during that time, I continued to hear that strange shuffling noise multiple times. I decided it was finally enough, and I was going to go inside and try to go to bed. I grabbed my chair and started walking toward the house. When I was only about 15 feet away from the back door, though, I noticed there were footprints in the sand, and they led from a sand dune pile to the house. I knew for a fact these footprints did not belong to me or anyone in my family. The footprints stopped short of the house and looked like they turned around and ran back to the beach. My mind started running wild. I started to think about those weird noises I'd been hearing all night. I couldn't shake the possibility that I'd heard a person behind me. I had the crazy thought that when I went inside to grab a drink, that's when the person made their way to the house. They must have noticed me coming back out, and they hadn't expected it, so they turned around and fled. I really got myself freaked out, and now I couldn't relax at all. I was paranoid there really was a person outside, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to wake everyone up, because for all I knew, I was just being crazy, and nobody really was out there. I triple-checked that all the locks were locked, and I sat up in the living room watching Disney Plus all night long. I started binge-watching the Marvel movies just to try and get my mind off the paranoia. At some point, I fell asleep. I woke up a while later because of the TV. I turned the TV off, feeling much better than I did earlier. I was just laying there on the couch, Now in complete silence and darkness, I was just about to slip away back to sleep when I began to hear something faintly. I listened in for a second and thought I could hear the sound of a doorknob. I grabbed my phone and shined the flashlight at the door. The doorknob was ever so softly shaking back and forth. It was undeniable. I quietly crept over to the door and looked out the peephole. It was a man I'd never seen before, wearing something covering his entire face. He was just standing there trying to turn the doorknob. The scariest thing about this is that he seemed to be looking directly at the peephole. He obviously would have no idea I was looking at him, and yet it was almost as if he were making direct eye contact with me. I quietly ran back to the couch and decided to phone the police. As I was doing this, I looked back and noticed the doorknob was not shaking anymore. Before I could feel any comfort at all, it was instantly ripped away. I looked over at the window and very clearly saw the man peeking through with cupped hands. I could feel myself trembling. The man was only there for a second before he ducked down and slipped out of sight. I connected with the police and told them what was going on, and immediately woke up my family as well. I told the cops everything when they arrived, and I remember them being in the area for the next few days. From what I understand, they were never able to catch the guy. Some people in this world are just nuts, I guess, and do things for the sake of doing them. We didn't know this guy at all, and he had no reason to try and break into our home. He still tried all the same. I never went back to that ocean after sunset on that trip, and going forward, I have no desire to visit that beach after sundown again. I'm supposed to be returning to that Cape Cod house again this summer, and I'm a little scared. I think the chances of encountering that creep again, though, are slim to none. If anything crazy happens, though, I'll be sure to write an update and let everyone know I'm safe and sound. This is something that happened to me in the 1990s. My name is Jennifer, and I had recently moved into a house in a pretty typical neighborhood. It was about 30 minutes outside of a major city, and I was renting a smaller 2-bedroom home. I lived by myself at the time and had a cord phone that was attached to the wall in the kitchen. That was my only phone back then, and I didn't even have a cell phone at all. I remember one night I randomly got a call very late. It was sometime after 10 o'clock, I believe, but I don't remember the exact time. Obviously, it's very unusual to get calls at that hour, especially from like telemarketers or something. I guessed it must have been from a family member, or even a friend perhaps. I answered it, but when I picked up the phone, it was a man on the other end I didn't immediately recognize. Hello? Hi, is this Jennifer speaking? I said yes, and asked who this was that was calling. He didn't really answer me. The guy just started rambling. He said I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and described me in vast detail. He went on and on about how much he liked me. I thought this was really weird, because I didn't even recognize this voice at all, and had no idea who he could be. When I asked him again who he was, he didn't answer me. When he refused to tell me who he was, I started to feel really uncomfortable about things. I ended up just hanging up on him. It was one of the strangest phone calls that I had ever gotten. Clearly, this guy had seen me before somewhere. He described enough of me for it to be sure that he really did know me, and he also knew my name somehow. I knew all the people at my job, though, and he didn't sound like anybody from there. I just had no idea who it could be. I was hoping he wouldn't call back, but of course he did just a short time later. It was only about 10 minutes after I'd initially hung up on him the first time. When I answered the phone, I heard him begin talking again, and almost hung up on him immediately. What he said in that split moment, though, shocked me so much that I couldn't do so at all. He said he was already there, and to let him in. That was followed shortly by a knocking at my front door. Whoever this guy was, he was right outside my home. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even want to look out to see who this man was. I was too scared. My blinds were closed anyways, so I couldn't see him. I didn't say anything to the man. He repeated himself, and finally I mustered up the courage to ask him to go away. The man said he wasn't going anywhere, and I heard him begin knocking once more. I told the man I was going to call the police if he didn't leave, but he didn't seem to be bothered at all. In a taunting tone, he said, "Well, what are they gonna do?" I hung up on him after that and dialed 911. I told the operator what was going on, and I was told that somebody would be out there shortly. After I got off the phone with the police, I did not hear any further knocking. The guy also didn't call me back. After maybe 10 minutes, the police got there. An officer knocked on the door, which at first I thought was the man again. I checked out the window though and saw it really was an officer. I let him in and informed him about what happened. He looked around my front and backyard, searching the entire property. Unfortunately, the man was long gone. He must have left after I called them. The officer asked me a few questions and said he would be around the area for a while. If something happened, to call again immediately. I did feel slightly better, but not a whole lot. I knew this guy was still out there somewhere. I was afraid he might come back and be angry. Maybe he'd even try to break in this time. After the police left, about 20 minutes or so went by when I heard a knocking at my front door again. My heart sank, knowing it was the same guy coming back. There was a slim chance it was the police again though, so I carefully and slowly crept toward my front window. I moved the blinds just slightly, just enough to see who was out there. I couldn't get a good view at all, but I could tell it was not the police officer. When I saw this, I moved away from the window and ran back to the phone. I called the police again and told them the man had returned. I was only on the phone with the police for a minute or so. After I got off the phone with them, the man called again. He was still knocking on the door as well. I answered his call, wondering what he wanted now. "You shouldn't have called the cops on me, Jennifer." He then asked me to let him in again. I really didn't know what to say, and I was really nervous. Eventually, I just hung up on him. Only a minute or two after this, I heard voices outside my house. The officers had come back, and it sounded like this time they'd actually caught the man. I went to my window and looked out. Sure enough, it was true. When I saw the guy, though, I couldn't believe who it actually was. It was my next-door neighbor, a guy who lived all alone in the house next to me. His name was Dan, and I'd only spoken to him in passing a single time before. He must have been observing me whenever I went outside. Sometimes I would go on walks in the neighborhood or do yard work. What a creep that guy was. I was able to get a restraining order against him, and luckily after that, I never did see him again. This is something that happened not too long ago. I got a call on my cell phone from a brand new number that I didn't recognize at all. Most of the people I know show up as their name when they call me. But recently I graduated from college, and as such I knew lots of people now. I'd made many friends over the years, so perhaps there was a chance this was somebody I knew, but didn't have their number. People get new phones and numbers all the time. I answered it, and the person on the other end simply said hello. I asked who it was, and I heard a man speaking. The man said he'd received my number from one of my friends and hoped I didn't mind. I said, "Okay, well, who are you?" I was positive that I had no clue who this guy was. When he didn't answer me, I hung up on him. It was a pretty strange interaction. Something about this guy, I could just tell he was weird for sure. I thought that would be that though, because he didn't call me for the rest of the day. The next day, though, he texted me. The text said, and I quote, "You can tell a lot about somebody by looking them up online, you know?" I didn't know what he meant by this. Was he saying that he'd looked me up online? I had social media accounts on things like Instagram and Facebook, and people could see things about me if they wanted. I responded to the guy, asking him what exactly he meant. I told him he was being really creepy as well. The guy did not respond to my texts, at least not right away. The next time I was contacted by him was actually the following day. He sent me a few messages. When I saw they were images, I immediately got a bad feeling. I opened them up to see that one was of my apartment complex and the other was a photo of my car. It looked like he had taken the pictures himself. My car was parked in the parking lot of the apartment complex. This was extremely weird. Now, somehow he had found out where I lived. I didn't know what his point was by showing me this, though. Was this guy bragging about being my stalker or something? After that, I blocked him. The craziest thing, though, is after I blocked him, I haven't been contacted by him ever since. Obviously, he couldn't reach me with that number because it was blocked, but he didn't reach out to me on social media or anything. He didn't even try to threaten me. I mean, I'm glad he didn't, but I also don't know why he even did any of this in the first place. It all remains a bit of a mystery to me. The university I go to is a little bit weird. There's always a ton of graffiti on the walls in the men's room. I remember one time I went in, and one of them caught my eye in particular. It was on the 4th floor of one of the buildings on campus, and the building was pretty old, not like the more modern ones on the other side. I had to use the men's room on the 4th floor that afternoon because all the other ones were full. As I was reading some of the graffiti I mentioned previously, I guess most people read what's written on the walls in the bathroom like me. I mean, there really isn't all that much to do in there, is there? There was the usual kind of stuff you might expect. I found my eyes drawn to one in particular, though, written in small writing in the corner. There were some numbers, and those numbers were the following: 183 450 298. The last number had some dots after it. They were written all spaced apart, and it didn't seem to make much sense to me. One thing that really piqued my interest about this one was the fact it was somewhat hidden. Unlike graffiti you might see in a football stadium bathroom or a truck stop, these numbers were tucked away from the natural places your eyes might look, almost as if it was a little secret. That to me was pretty interesting. I wondered what it meant and who it was intended for. Somehow the number seemed a little familiar to me too, but I couldn't quite place from where I'd seen them before. It dawned on me that one of the sets of numbers at the beginning was a part of my student number, hence why I was able to recall it. Huh? That's weird. I decided to take note of the other numbers as well, and see if I could find out if they were student numbers too. If so, I planned on trying to find out who they were, and what, if any, correlation they had with my student number. I searched the other two numbers, and found out that something had happened to the other two students. They'd both gotten into accidents and died. It was weird, but I wasn't exactly sure what to make of this. A few days went by, and I found myself in need of the bathroom again. I was near that building, so I decided to head up to the 4th floor once more. I don't know why. I just felt like checking out that graffiti again. I went to the same stall and sat down, and looked at the corner where I'd seen it before. I was slightly surprised to see there was something new written down. 183 finished. 450 finished. 298 not done. There were a couple other numbers that I can't quite remember now, but they all had different little phrases next to them. I knew one said something like a little bit longer. I recognized one number amongst the other new ones though. 361, one of my friend's ID numbers. His number had the words "not yet" written next to it too. I remembered that he'd gotten into an accident recently on the road when someone ran into his motorbike and he still hadn't woken up yet. I was really worried about him and about what not yet meant. It was too much of a coincidence for me. After I visited him at the hospital, I went back to our university and into the old building on campus. I went back to the bathroom on the 4th floor and headed into the stall with the numbers on it. I found my number and used some Tipex or whiteout to cover it up. I was scared something might happen to me. I was scared somebody was looking at this and doing something to people or something, and I wanted to be on the safe side. Yesterday, I headed back up there again. I wanted to make sure that no one had written anything new. I didn't want to see my number there yet again, but I was shocked to see that not only was my number back, there was something else written on the wall as well. It was something I hadn't seen written down until that point. It said, "Do not try to erase your number." I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, and I don't know what to do about this either. I've been thinking about informing the police and the school faculty, and I'll update if anything else happens. I just hope that nothing does. Guys, this is a little bit of an unusual story and/or situation, and I'm not sure if this is the right platform to be sharing this. I don't think it'll be out of place here if I share my experience, though. Maybe I'm wrong, and you can decide if I am. I won't be naming names or locations in specific to maintain my privacy. Anyway, this all happened to a place that was very close to my heart at the time, and if I'm honest, a place that I really miss. It was my mother's coffee shop. Like with any restaurant or bar, there were many regulars. My mom had this one regular at her coffee shop, a customer who used to come in at the same time every day. It was always right on the dot like clockwork. She noticed one time there was a difference in his regularity. He stormed in at a different time than usual and asked if he could use the restroom. Of course, my mom said, "Please, go ahead." She waited for him to approach the counter and order his usual, but he didn't that day. He left just as quickly as he had entered. No coffee for him that day. Sadly, that was the very last time my mother saw him, because unfortunately, the young man chose to end things for himself. He chose to leap from a very tall building nearby. My mother wasn't exactly his friend. I mean, even though he was a regular, they never struck up any form of deep conversation or anything. He was just kind of there, and so was she. No one really understood why he'd done what he did. There were some rumors that reached her ears from the coffee shop. She'd heard he'd been deceived. I'm not sure if it was a money thing or a romantic thing. I guess it doesn't matter now. It could have just been a rumor as well. Well, shortly after her regular passed away, strange things began to occur at her coffee shop. Customers complained quite regularly that they couldn't gain access to the bathroom because it had suddenly been locked from the inside. They would complain there was someone in there who was taking way too long. My mom at first chalked this up to a bunch of coincidences, but as her customer complaints came in more and more regularly, she found it harder to defend, especially when she finally opened the bathroom door one time, only to find that nobody was there. She said that whenever she opened the door with her master key and went to investigate, she felt as though a presence was in the bathroom with her, or if someone had just left past her. I have to admit as well, when I helped out on shift at my mom's cafe, I did often feel as if there was a presence with me. I don't know if I can really put the feeling into words. It was just like somebody was there watching me. My mom couldn't stand it. She didn't feel right in her own cafe. She thought it wasn't great for business either, so she decided to call in a priest to bless the place. I know that sounds a bit rash, but honestly it seemed necessary. I think it cost my mother a lot of money, but it was for her own sanity and comfortability. We didn't exactly know what the going rate was for an exorcism or whatever the priest did. I feel as if it's hard to say, but maybe it was not the best deal. It was this exorcism and/or blessing that proved to be the cafe's downfall. Our intention was for it to clear the air, start fresh, you know. However, the reputation the place got after that priest showed up was really unexpected. Before we knew it, we were accused of being haunted, and we were listed as a creepy location on the internet. Sadly, my mother had to close the place and put it up for sale. It was about 6 months after the strange goings-on began. As soon as it was listed, another more established company jumped at the chance and rented out the building. 2 months later, it was closed to the public and back on the market. It would sell. Then after a few months, I'd see it online again. No matter what type of business ended up owning the place, it seemed they would only own it for a short while before it was back on the market once more. It was very weird, and still is. As far as I know, it continues to this day. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but I feel as if that young man's grudge or residual energy is trapped in that old shop, and any business that opens its doors there is doomed to be haunted. I wonder what his thoughts were during his final visit to the cafe. Why does his soul linger there if it really is something paranormal? I wonder, why does he choose the bathroom to occupy? There's a toilet stall in my school's bathroom that doesn't open. It's just always locked, it seems, and no one really can say why. It's the bathroom on the first floor of the north building, and the stall that won't open is the furthest one from the bathroom door. It's locked up tight, and it doesn't budge at all. It's pretty weird, to be honest with you. The north building is rarely used, and the rooms in that building aren't even being used for lessons currently. It's become more of a storage location. Due to the fact that not many people use that building, of course it wasn't long before creepy rumors began to spread around our school. There was a rumor going around that if you knocked on the door that never opens, something would knock back. The kids at the school said the paranormal lurked beyond that door, some kind of spirit or ghost. They said even that if you asked if anyone was there, you would get a response too. It seemed like all everyone was talking about was that stall door. Of course, no one could really agree on what the reply would be, though. I heard many different things and exaggerations. Well, one day I decided to go see if those rumors were true. A couple other boys from my class wanted to test their mettle as well. We arranged to meet on the first floor of the north building when the sun went down. We didn't need to wait long after school for it to get dark, since it was during the winter. All of the restrooms in this building were supposed to have the same layout, I guess, because the shape of the building never changed from floor to floor. That bathroom, though, had this kind of weird atmosphere. I don't know how to put it, really. Just felt like there was a presence there. It was very quiet that day. You could have heard a pin drop in that bathroom. The first thing I noticed was the closed stall. We all headed over to it. Some of the boys were braver than the others, and some immediately tried yanking on the door handle in an attempt to wrench it open. No matter how much they pushed and pulled, the door didn't seem to budge. We thought we might be able to take a look at whatever was inside that stall by standing on the toilet and the one next to it and peeking over the wall. We quickly realized, though, that that was going to be impossible. It was boarded from the top of the stall door to the ceiling. Well, there was only one more option we could try, knocking on the door to see if the rumors were true. We didn't know who should knock first. No one really wanted to volunteer. My friend went over to the door and just started knocking. I began to feel a strange surge of chills race through me at the very moment he knocked on the door. I put it down to the fact I was feeling more than a little nervous. We all stood there in silent anticipation to see if a ghost really would reply to my friend's knocking, but of course no response came. He turned around and faced the rest of us with a sly smile on his face. He then shrugged and said, "Guess I'll try this then. Is anybody there?" The only response we received was the sound of the tap dripping in the sink on the other side of the room. "All right, well, I guess the rumor's false, guys," he said. After that, the tension in the room began to dissipate. We all calmed down a little and began to joke and crack wise about the situation. "Guys, I'm gonna take a break and then we're getting out of this super scary bathroom." Most of my friends took a whiz. At that same time, my friend was showing off his confidence by whistling as he went to the bathroom. It had a completely new atmosphere when suddenly a noise cut through the bathroom. It was a creaking sound that I recognized immediately. I couldn't physically bring myself to look in the direction of that noise. Guys, I think the stall door is open now." We all agreed, but not one of us wanted to turn to face the stall. No one dared to look back. I was the closest one to the door that never opened, and after I'd finished relieving myself, I shook off my fear and turned to face it. One of my friends had beaten me to it, though. I heard him scream and watched him run out of the bathroom. This, of course, set off mass hysteria between us, and we all started screaming and running too. We left the bathroom and ran to our friend, who'd gotten out first. He was sitting down on the floor with his back against the wall. "Hey man, are you okay? What happened?" Questions like that we fired at him from all angles. When he replied, it was quite shocking. "I don't know, guys. I saw something in there. It was like a small shrine, an altar to worship of some kind." "Why would that be in there? It's a bathroom stall." We all looked at him skeptically. "It really was there, I swear." We all wanted to go back in there to see if we could see it. We all formed a line and slowly opened the bathroom door. As soon as we were back in, we could all see the stall door was closed again. That was really shocking. We thought we were the only ones in the building, and we had just left the bathroom a short time ago. It didn't seem possible for it to be closed again without someone interfering. We went over to the door and all had a go at trying to pry it open again, but it wouldn't budge. It was sealed up tight, almost as if it had never opened at all. Thing is, we'd all experienced it. It was a very weird experience, and one that left us with more questions than answers. It turned out the rumors were not true about hearing a reply from the other side, or hearing someone responding to you or knocking on the door. But the thing is, I couldn't explain what happened there in that afternoon. It seemed there definitely was something strange and creepy in that stall. If there was some kind of altar for worship in there, what exactly were they trying to worship? Why would you keep it hidden in a bathroom stall at a place at our school? None of it made any sense. A few weeks went by and we all kind of forgot about what happened. I think for me personally, the reason I forgot was because I couldn't process it well, and my brain just wanted to get rid of it. It was occupying too many of my thoughts. My friends and I decided to have a sleepover at my house since my parents were going to be gone for a while. This story took place over 10 years ago. My mom told me she would be going to Mexico to visit some family members that were ill. She wanted me to stay and feed and take care of the dogs, so I agreed. She told me she would be leaving on Friday night and would most likely be back on Monday. Since I was 14 at the time, of course I was happy to have the house free of adults, even for a few days. On Friday, she lent me some money and told me she'd ordered a pizza and to tip the driver. She left at around 6, and the pizza got there at around 7. I tipped the driver and he left. At around 8 p.m., I decided to call up my friends and see if they were trying to hang out. I didn't want to be all by myself for the entire weekend. My friends we'll call Omar and Louis. They agreed to come over and hang out for a while. We all kind of lived in the same neighborhood, so they could easily bike over to my house. They got there at around 8:30. We stayed up playing 2K and Call of Duty together, like most teenagers do. We stopped playing at around 11 p.m. or so, and were kind of getting bored. We decided to watch a scary movie. I told them they could go ahead and pick one, while I went and put some popcorn in the microwave. While I was putting the popcorn in, I suddenly heard a giant bang in my backyard, like something had just slammed into our fence. My kitchen is at the back of the house, and there's 2 big windows in the back, so if something was there, for sure they would have seen me. I thought it was probably my dogs in the backyard, so I shrugged it off at first, and we started watching the movie. Mid-movie, we began to hear a knocking on my front door. This startled us, so I decided to go see who it was. When I went over to the door, I was surprised to see a girl no older than 19. She was banging on my door, telling me to open it. I could hear her begging for help, saying that somebody was after her. As you can imagine, my friends and I were all scared shitless. Lewis decided to run over and open the door to help her. As he did, she pushed the door open and knocked him down. 2 other guys rushed in right behind her. When this happened, I knew right then and there they were going to rob us. That's when Omar and I ran upstairs, which was probably the dumbest thing we could have done. Lewis got up there quickly and followed us, and the girl followed us too. The 2 guys stayed behind and tried to steal anything they saw, including my Xbox. Omar and I ran up to the attic, but Lewis was a little bit chubby, so he didn't quite make it. He ran into my room and put his body against the door. Luckily, the girl didn't see us going into the attic, but I think she did see Lewis run into the room. She probably assumed we were all in there. She began pounding on the door and throwing her body against it. All of a sudden, we were completely surprised when Lewis threw it open and tackled her. That's when he started jumping on her. That's when Omar and I decided to get in on the fight and started to yell that I'd called the cops and they were on their way. The guys ran out, and the girl got roughed up a bit. Lewis got off of her, and she joined them in fleeing. They ended up leaving, and we decided not to tell anyone what happened. They only really got the Xbox, and nothing else at all. We couldn't really get any sleep for the rest of the night though, but we were happy we'd managed to scare them off. I'm really grateful that all of us ended up being okay, and that it didn't get any worse than what it ended up being. Last year, I moved to another city after finishing high school. I assessed several college options and decided on one that would have me moving roughly 3 hours away. I found an apartment where I would be able to live without roommates. It was in a safe part of town, with a reasonable rent too. It was also close to some attractions in the city, which was an added bonus to me. It would still allow me to have a reasonable social life. For the first 4 months or so, it was pretty great. There were absolutely no problems or safety concerns of any sort, and I managed to become good friends with a guy who studied at the same college as me. Coincidentally, he lived around 5 minutes away from me, so we would often hang out at each other's places. One night, just as winter started, he had called me over to play some video games and hang out. We had a pretty chill night, drank a few beers, and had a few good laughs as well. We enjoyed ourselves quite a bit. At around 1 a.m. or so, we decided to call it a wrap, and I headed home to my apartment. When I got back home, I decided to head out to the balcony that overlooked the entrance of my building. I wanted to smoke a cigarette. I vividly remember looking around and seeing absolutely nobody at all. It was a cold winter night, and it was not the weekend, so understandably everyone was back at home. There was a car or two passing by, but other than that it was dead quiet. Once I finished my cigarette, I decided to call it a night and get ready for bed. I was understandably confused then when I heard a short ring at my doorbell. I stood in the center of my room for a solid few seconds. Confusion and a little bit of fear washed over me. I soon snapped out of it though, and decided to tiptoe over to my door and try and see if anyone was outside. My immediate thought was that my friend must have come over to drop something off I might have forgotten. Then I thought to myself that he surely would have texted me or called. I probably listened in for half a minute or so when the person once again rang the doorbell, then softly knocked a few times. I was stood still and didn't want to make a sound so I wouldn't give away the fact that I was at the door. I could hear the stranger pacing around for a few seconds before he stopped altogether. I waited for any sort of noise, but it was completely quiet, and that's when I decided to look at the peephole and see that the person had hopefully left. I picked up the cover of the peephole and took a look. My legs pretty much went numb as I saw a hooded figure looking straight in. He was holding the zipper of his hoodie as if to hide his face all the way. All I could really make out was his forehead and his eyes. He must have either heard me lift the cover or my heavy breathing, because right away he moved from the peephole and then said, "I know you're at the door." By this point I was pretty much shivering in fear, but I mustered up the courage to say I was calling the cops. He then began to laugh and said, "Yeah, sure thing, big guy." He proceeded to wipe away the door handle with a sleeve before walking off. I understandably called the police. When they came over, they actually informed me I wasn't the only one he'd been doing this to. He'd been doing this for at least a month now. They also suspected him of at least one home invasion, where a father had to chase him out of their home. I crashed in my friend's house for around a week or so after this. It took a while for me to feel comfortable going back to my own apartment. It's been a year now, and I haven't heard any further news about him. He could have been arrested by now, but as far as I know, he hasn't been. I find it more than likely that he simply moved to a different area. I'm not sure if he had any violent intent or not, but either way, I hope we never run into each other again. The story I'm about to share takes place approximately 6 to 7 years ago. I had recently gotten out of a long-term relationship and moved back to my hometown with a buddy of mine. He was living by himself in a house he'd recently bought. He had plenty of extra space, and so he gave me a great deal on rent. I remember being very appreciative of the offer, just because so much of my life had changed. I had gotten out of a relationship, started a new job, and now would be in the process of moving. Living with my friend Calvin was pretty fun right off the bat. I think the first night after I officially moved in, we cracked open a bottle and just had some drinks. I'm not normally a big drinker. I remember being hungover the next day at the job I'd just started, no more than a week prior. All of my single friends were on Tinder and trying to convince me to join. I wasn't into social media, and the thought of meeting someone randomly on an app did not seem very appealing. Also, the stories they told me about their various interactions and encounters certainly didn't make it any more enticing for me to join. I decided to hard pass on doing this and was looking forward to being single for the first time in a long while. It was not out of the ordinary for Calvin and I to have people over at the house on weekends. We never really had parties, but we would have 5 or 6 people over if there was nothing else going on. I remember one night specifically, we had more than just a few people over. Each person we invited brought a friend or two, and a few people at the house asked if they could set up a table to play beer pong. We didn't care. Let everyone have at it. One of my really good friends, Kelsey, came over that night to see the new place and hang out for a bit. We hadn't seen each other in at least a year, and I was excited to see what new was up with her. We sat down on the couch and talked for at least 45 minutes, updating each other about our families and what was new in our lives. I grabbed us both a drink and sat back down. That was when she said, "I saw you took the plunge, huh?" I looked at her confused and asked what she was talking about. She smiled and responded, Tinder, you dummy. I came across your profile. I didn't swipe right because I didn't want to be weird, but you could have picked some better pictures with a better resolution." "Very funny," I said. She looked at me kind of confused, as I told her I was not on Tinder at all. "Well, if you're really not on there, someone's using your name and your pictures. I didn't read your profile, but it was definitely you and definitely your name." I looked at her dumbfounded. Well, that's pretty creepy. You think you could find it again, maybe?" She wasn't sure. She called over her friend. "Hey, Kristen, come here. Can you get on Tinder and keep scrolling until you find him? Maybe try and limit it to local or something, so it's not as many accounts." Kristen knew what was going on and gave the thumbs up. She went back over to the Pong table, and we moved on with our conversation, switched to updating the playlist that was playing on the speakers at the party as well. In the middle of a big laugh about one of the songs we chose, Kristen came over and said, "I think this is you, buddy." It was me for sure. She had matched with this fake profile. I asked her to scroll through the photos. There was one really old one from when I had Facebook, a couple of pictures from my Instagram account I had not posted anything new on for at least a few years. The profile did have my name, but there was not anything in the bio. I don't recall if it even said anything at all. I asked Kristen if she could message them and ask for their number. She did, and to my surprise, the person responded instantly. Instead of providing a number, though, they had her go to an Instagram account. I had her send it to me, so Kelsey and I could figure out what was going on. I figured it was just going to be one of those Instagram bots or something that said for only $4.99 we'll give you 10,000 followers or whatever. When we got to the account, though, I was very surprised. It was not private. The profile picture was a picture of my face with my full name. I started to get a little angry and a bit concerned. I immediately went to message the account and said something along the lines of, "Stop using my name and photos." I told the account I had come across this page as well as that Tinder account, and I'd be reporting it to the police if it was not taken down. We waited 10 minutes or so, and there was no response. I put my phone away and decided to just have fun with my friends for the rest of the night. It was relatively uneventful. A couple of friends crashed on the couch, and we ended up cleaning up a bit before deciding we would save the rest for the morning. I remember putting on Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors as I cleaned up my room and got ready for bed. Even though it was late into the night, I wasn't feeling that tired. As soon as I got into bed and turned on my fan, though, I passed out instantly. At about 3 a.m. or so, my phone buzzed loudly. I usually kept it on silent or do not disturb, but I must have completely forgotten with all that business earlier. There was an Instagram notification from the fake account. It was just a smiley face. Even though I was half asleep, I typed back demanding again that they delete the account and stop using my name and photos. I fell back asleep. I woke up the next morning and had another response. It said, "Anything for you." Very creeped out and annoyed, I noticed the account did not have my profile picture anymore. It was just a black circle, and my name had been removed from the profile. I thought that would be the end of this annoying BS. The topic honestly slipped my mind for a while, until the following weekend. I had the house all to myself, and wasn't feeling all that great. I wanted to stay in bed and relax, while Calvin went out to a bar and restaurant downtown. I was in bed watching TV, when I got another alert on my phone. It was another Instagram message from the same account. "I know where you are," smiley face. I looked at the message, trying to think of what to respond with. Before I could respond, though, an image popped into the chat. It was a picture, the outside of Calvin's home. It looked like it was taken from across the street, but it was hard to tell the exact location. The only lighting was the streetlights outside. I got out of bed and made sure all the lights were off and all the doors and windows were locked. Thankfully, they were. I didn't respond to the message. I don't know why, honestly. It was probably because I was terrified and didn't want to have a confrontation if someone really was outside. I didn't want them drawing any closer to my abode. I sat there in silence, with just the TV screen on and the volume on mute. I was anxious, hoping I would not receive anything else. I didn't for another few hours. I think 2 or 3 hours later, I felt another buzz from my phone. This time it said, "I know we asleep," smiley face. My heart sank. I had a baseball bat under my bed, and I grabbed it. My phone lit up again. This time there was a picture of a window. It was impossible to make out exactly which one, but I think they were trying to insinuate they were outside my window. I grabbed my bat and flung open the back door. I screamed that if they came anywhere near this house or our dog, I would tear them to shreds. I also said the cops were on their way. I slammed the door shut and locked it, terrified that I'd even gone outside alone. We didn't have a dog, but I thought that might deter someone if they were actually out there. Only 15 minutes later, I heard the front door rattling and the door swinging open. I readied myself to take a swing with my bat. Calvin asked me what I was doing, and I explained the entire thing to him. After debating if we should call the cops or not, we decided to block the account and see if anything else would happen. Thankfully, nothing ever came of the incident, and I didn't receive any other scary messages or have any other friends telling me they found fake profiles of me. I know you're probably thinking that was my last experience with Tinder, but you're wrong. About 6 months later, I did rejoin, and I have various different stories for a different day. Thankfully, that was my worst experience on the app. Last month, I decided to sell my big TV with an attached TV stand on Craigslist. I got a new TV that's slightly larger and mounted on the wall. The old TV had this large stand, and I just kinda had it in the dining room. My wife had been asking me to get rid of it for a while, but I thought I could get some money for it, so I put it up on Craigslist. For a few days, I got no interest at all. I was seriously considering lowering the price on it, because to be honest, it wasn't that great of a deal. Right as I was about to, though, I finally caught some interest. A man reached out and told me that he might want to purchase it. He asked if he could see it in person, and I told him only if he was serious about this. He said he was, so I gave him my address, and we arranged for him to come over and look at it. The arrangement was for the next night at 7 p.m. I live in an average-sized 2-story home. It's just me and my wife. Because the TV and stand were kind of bulky, I really didn't feel like lugging it to my car to drive to some local parking lot. I figured it wouldn't be that big a deal that I was giving my address to him. The next night at 7 p.m., I waited for the guy to show up. After 30 minutes went by with nothing, I sent him a text asking if he was still coming. He responded by saying he was on his way, and I kept waiting. By the time he actually arrived, it was 8 o'clock and pitch black outside. When I saw his car, I was immediately disappointed. He had arrived in a small 4-door sedan, and there was no way the TV or the stand would fit inside of it. I watched the car drive slowly in front of our house, but then it passed by. I thought for a moment that maybe it was not him after all, or maybe he was confused on the address. He later parked a ways down, almost out of sight. I wasn't sure why he'd parked so far away, but whatever. The guy then walked up the street, and I met him at the front step. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt with the hood up, and appeared to be in his 20s. I invited him in and showed him the TV and the stand. They weren't too far away from the door at all. I asked the guy if he wanted to buy it. The guy just stood there and looked at it for a few moments. Then he said that he would buy it, but he didn't get paid until Friday and would have to wait until then. I was pretty annoyed by this. I started walking the guy to the door, kind of leading him out. I asked why he would even come over today if he wouldn't be able to buy it. The man said he just wanted to see it. He then walked out my front door and back outside. We said goodbye to each other, and I shut the door. During this whole meeting, my wife had been upstairs in our bedroom. I sat down on the living room couch and turned on the larger mounted TV. My wife rushed downstairs and asked me why the guy had gone into our backyard. I was so confused. I asked her what she was talking about. She told me that while she'd been upstairs, she saw out the window when the guy left. He'd walked straight around our house and into the backyard. I went out to the front window and looked outside. I could barely see within my vision that his car was still there down the street. I didn't know why the guy would be back there. I went around to the back windows and looked out of them. At first, I didn't see anything. I asked my wife if she'd seen where in the backyard he had gone. She told me he'd disappeared behind a bush. I kept looking through the windows. Eventually, I turned on a light outside and leaned over. I looked out towards the bushes and could barely see the man crouching down and hiding. I could only see a small part of him, but that was enough. I cracked open the window just a tiny bit and yelled out that if he didn't leave right now, I was going to call the police. Just seconds later, the man got up and sprinted away. I went to the front of the house and looked out the window. My wife and I watched as the man sprinted all the way back to his car. He sped off like a bat out of hell. After that, I took the listing off of Craigslist, and I also reported the incident. I regret giving that guy my address, and I really should have known better. I'm glad that my wife actually saw him behind our house, because who knows what his plans might have been. So I'm 30 years old, live with my parents, and used to have my own house. Got divorced when we were 27 though, and lost the house in the divorce. I still go to work, and so does my elderly mom. She only works 2 days a week though, at the same restaurant she has been for 40 years. Those 2 days are Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're always good about locking the door once the sun goes down. But on Mom's work days, she goes to the casino after work and comes home quite late. Because of that, we leave the door unlocked so she can come in without any hassle. I like to take advantage and lounge around on the couch with the place to myself. Our couch is located right next to the door. You can always hear the door jiggling when it opens, and it makes a very particular noise, like swollen wood pressing against each other. At some point, I began to hear the door open. I saw it starting to pop, thinking that it was my mom. Sometimes she puts her things down and brings in groceries, so she'll pop the door open just a bit, pick her stuff up, and come in after. I looked over and saw it was cracked open about 3 or 4 inches. In that moment, I made eye contact with the person, obviously not my mother. The door lingered for a moment, then slammed shut. Honestly, I was kind of freaked out. I ran over and opened the door without putting myself in the doorway. I leaned out a little and tried to look around. I couldn't see anyone there, but I did hear the crunch of gravel of someone running away. Now, the scary thing is, I'm a bit of a redneck, and we live almost an hour away from any other civilization. I slammed the door real quick and ran for my Glock 26 in my room. I went back to the door and put on the heavy latch. I waited for 30 more minutes in the living room, gun at the ready. My mom finally pulled up, and I unlocked the door for her. She walked in, and it was almost like nothing had ever happened. It was such a scary experience for me, though.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you have your own encounter you'd like to share, leave a comment below. Who knows, it might just find its way into a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the scariest stories are often the ones closest to home.